WEF and UN tool that's been announced. Well, it was announced a couple months back, but sometimes you just can't catch everything. But it is called the Global Health Equity Network, and this thing from January 2023. Global Health Equity Network. We're not going to read through this thing. It's long. It's boring. Bunch of stuff that we don't need to listen to. So I'll just kind of give you a rundown, essentially what it is. Excuse me. All right. Basically, it's adding health equity to the ESG system. So it's not a brand new thing in itself, but it is adding to the already ridiculously stupid ESG system, which is basically a social credit score for companies and corporations and all that stuff. We've talked about it like crazy. We're not gonna dive into that. But this is adding health equity to it now. And if companies don't play ball, just like with everything else with ESG, their funding will be taken. So everybody's got an ESG score. You've got the companies that have it, and you have the investors that have it. If the investors invest in companies that push up the ESG system, then the investor score goes up. But if they do it with companies that aren't playing the ESG game, then their score goes down. So if the company is not going to play the ESG game, the investors are going to pull out because it's going to affect their score. See how that works? It's a great little scam system if you're not the one that has to be forced to do things. These companies will be forced to sign their pledge to the cult called the Zero Health Gaps Pledge. Now, I've got that as well, so we can check this out. Global Health Equity Network, the Zero Health Gaps Pledge. Man, that World Economic Forum tag is just on a lot of things, isn't it? This is also from January 2023, as you would expect. We take a look at some of this stuff. Again, we're not going to read through all those points. I'll leave it up. So if you want to take a screenshot or check it out on your own time, you can. A lot of it is just vague, general stuff that they usually talk about, but you can check it out. But basically what they're doing is you have to sign up on this pledge to basically say we are going to play game with the health equity parts of the ESG that's now being added. So if we take a look at some of these, hopefully you guys got your screenshot. If not, this video will be uploaded afterwards. You can take a look at it then. We're moving on. If we take a look at some of the people that have already signed this thing, there's some interesting names. I highlighted some that kind of stand out to me. American Cancer Society, American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association. I believe one of the co-chairs is from the American Heart Association. We will check that out in a second. Then we've got AstraZeneca, of course. We've got Big Pharma involved. Deliate, I cannot pronounce that company name. I've looked it up before this and I already forgot it. That's just how I roll. I can't pronounce things. We're going to call it Deliate. Then there's Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. If you guys don't know who that is Bill Gates. Global Partnership Forum, of course. We've got John Hopkins. They're involved with anything in World Economic Forum. Of course, they're a partner with them. Ochsner Health, Pfizer, Planned Parenthood, and a bunch of other ones which are no good as well. They have all signed up to be a part of this, with more coming on board. Of course, this is trying to create a global healthcare supply network in a chain, basically placing a chain upon global health companies. So if you're not going to play ball with the WEF and what they want to do with the health stuff, we know the UN, WHO, pandemic treaties coming up. If you're not going to play game with that, well, prepare yourself to not be around. That's what's going on with this. And of course, there's some partners with this thing. Take a look at some of these partners. Yeah, Heart Association, Deliate, whatever. Harvard University, Global, Kaiser Permanente, CVS, you just take a pick. AstraZeneca's there. UNICEF, of course. Even Philips is there, of course. Salesforce, interesting. BP as well, that's interesting as well. We got gas going on in there. There's a couple more. Boston University, Planeter, Johnson & Johnson, Colgate, Palmolive, Global Fund. Yeah, there's a lot there. All right, here we go. So those are some of the people partnered. Those are some of the people that signed on with it. Again, Basically, what they're doing is they're preparing for that WHO pandemic treaty. If you're not going to play game with the new global health government that's being created, don't plan on being a healthcare provider anymore. That's basically what they're trying to accomplish through this. And of course, where does this come from? Because it always has to stem from somewhere. Well, of course, it comes from the UN SDGs, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. If you don't want to hear it from me, you can hear it from the big shot of this Global Health Equity Network. Check this out.
This is a core element of stakeholder capitalism, the business community demonstrating that we're part of the solution and that we're taking action relative to the commitment to make good on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the words are the easy part. So then the question is, well, what specifically can businesses do? We are pleased with the momentum and the number of organizations that have already signed up. It's not enough. And so we're going to be focused on expanding that ecosystem that we're creating. We need to develop measurement mechanisms so that we can actually quantify individual companies' health equity footprints. And with measurement, then allows for setting goals. It allows for accountability. And we're going to do this as a collective. No one has all the answers, but we're putting together the ecosystem to really be able to drive change at scale. And we are encouraged by the opportunity that's sitting here in front of us.
As it was said earlier by my colleagues, signing a pledge is not the end, it's the beginning.
Ooh, ominous. It's not the end, it's the beginning. I tend to agree with her. Well, it's going to be the beginning of, not the beginning, but one of the things that will be a part of the beginning of hell on earth for those left behind. But for us who have Jesus Christ, no, we're going to skip it. I don't feel like dealing with that, so we're going to escape. That's why we've got Jesus. He cares about us. He's going to take us out of here. But for those left behind, yeah, that's not good. So who these people are, the people who are talking, the bigwigs there, these are the co-chairs of the GHEN. You have Joe. I am not even going to attempt to say his last name. For those who like to laugh at my pronunciation, not going to happen. Global CEO of Deloitte. Again, I'm not pronouncing it right. It's just how I roll, sorry. You can read it, though. But yeah, you can see he's the Global Chief Executive Officer there. Then you've got Michelle Williams there, who is the Dean of Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And then Nancy Brown, yeah, CEO of American Heart Association. So those are the top dogs of this new system. Isn't it great? Doesn't it look wonderful? No. I'm not with that. So, but they're talking about the SDGs. Now, we've talked about this before, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. They were brought in 2015, a part of the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 program. Mix and match, you get it. The climate agenda has been around much, much longer, though, and has been pretty much the main deal for forming a global government. And I'm just going to go ahead and pass it off to the Club of Rome.
The Club of Rome then held a press conference where they announced that the computer had predicted that the world was heading for a disaster.
From a very large number of computer runs, making various assumptions, adopting various maxima and minima, there is in fact a general forecast of a breakdown of world society in the first decades of the next century. We regard the MIT report as an extraordinarily important initial pioneering effort. It's opening up a great new field of research on the world as a system.
The Club of Rome published a book called The Limits to Growth, which laid out Forrester's world model and its frightening conclusions. It was a bestseller, and it transformed the debate about the environment. Because Forrester's model offered a way of conceptualizing the problem that seemed to be scientific and therefore neutral. His vision of the world as one interconnected system seemed to transcend politics and the petty interests of nations. Then, in Stockholm in 1972, the United Nations held a conference for the first time ever on the world environmental crisis. and the international bureaucrats who ran it turned to this idea of the world as a system to provide the conceptual framework. The world needed to be managed in a new, non-political way to avoid the threat of global collapse.
Now, this is the beginning of a debate. Nobody's decided precisely what the limits are. One can question whether it's 2010 where we all collapse or 2050 when we all collapse. But what is absolutely certain is you cannot run a planetary society on the total irresponsible sovereignty of 120 different governments. It simply can't be done.
You know, I find it interesting where she said 2010 or 2050. Well, 2030 falls right in the middle of that. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, so that was the Club of Rome and the UN back in 1970s that they were basically pushing this climate agenda is going to be the main focal point for getting this one world system into place, which of course we know the one world system will eventually become the Antichrist beast system. But yeah, I mean, but that was back in the 70s. And again, it's 2030 lands right dead center in those, between those two dates that she said. So it's very interesting how that works. But of course you've got none other than Uncle Klaus Eat the Bugs, who likes to take credit for the Club of Rome as well. This is from his own words.
I've worked on climate change for 25 years.
I worked on climate change since 73.
So you
just to
worked on
tell
it
you,
longer than
because
I have.
I was the person who gave the Club of Rome the first big platform. I share with you the concern, and I think we can solve those issues only if we repair our global architecture and our global system.
Architecture. Yeah, so of course he's got to take credit for that. So just yeah, something to keep in mind, guys. Remember, there is shadow guys above Mr. Klaus there too. Mr. Klaus, I'm not downplaying it. Dude's powerful. He's got a lot of stuff going on, but remember, there are other people sitting above him controlling all this as well, and people that we have no idea even exist. That's just how this rolls. Yeah. So as you can see, though, what we're seeing now is just the progression, this global health equity network, a part of the ESG stuff attached to the SDGs, which is attached to the Agenda 2030, which is attached to Agenda 21, which is attached to what the Club of Rome and the UN were doing back in the 1970s. It's all just step-by-step progression. And right now, what we're doing, I mean, we've seen all this stuff be in the works. We've seen it all coming right now, but what we are seeing now for the first time ever in the history of ever is the converging of all this stuff at the same time. And that's why when we look, that's why we watch these stuff so intently, and we understand that we're in the season of the rapture, because for the first time ever, and you have to remember 1948 when Israel became a nation in one day, that prophecy was fulfilled. That was the trigger point. So anything after that, that's when we need to start watching this stuff. And for the first time ever after that, and even before that, first time ever in history, ever, I'll say it one more time, ever, this stuff is all converging at the same time. And so this is why we watch these signs. This is how we know we're in the season. Of course, everybody likes to say, nobody knows the day or the hour. You're right, nobody does. But we were told that for those who watch for his return, watch for his, the signs of his return, that we'll know the season. And guys, we're in the season. He's going to come and snatch away his bride. And I cannot wait for that. So that's why we watch this stuff. That's why we look at these things. That's why we watch things like the Club of Rome from 1970. It's just, it's amazing to see the progression that we're seeing right now. And it just goes to show all the more ever the power of Scripture. It's never been wrong once. It's not going to be wrong now. And all this stuff that we're seeing come to fruition, all it was already told 2,000 years ago. It's just amazing. That's why we do this. So